Hello and welcome back to another episode of Ancient Historia. Today's episode is going to be talking about a destructive comet that hit the world 1500 years ago. This comet first arrived in the history books, in things like the Bible, where it can be heard spoken of as wormwood and in Revelations. We'll go back to the beginning for this story. You see, in 1986, Professor Michael Bailey of Queen's College, Belfast, published his first dendrochronology data for Britain and Ireland. The results showed that almost all forests were destroyed in the 6th century AD. He noted Chinese records of a volcanic eruption at Krakatoa in 535, and thus wrote that volcanic ash spewed out by the event had caused the mass extinction of Britain's flora. This is despite Krakatoa being on the other side of the Earth, and whilst more recent evidence has found of a similar but lesser effect to Europe's forests at the same time, there is a lack of evidence to suggest any of the other areas closer to the eruption had encountered anywhere near the same level of destruction as Britain and Ireland. Historian Alan Wilson, who in 1982 had discovered evidence of a cosmic phenomena in the British archives which he attributed to be a comet, contacted Professor Bailey and informed him of his findings. This included a rectification of the date to 562 AD, which is attributed to an inconsistency in apostolic Christianity, which started their dating from Christ's resurrection and ascension to divinity, rather than the birth. This leaves a 33-ish year deviation in historic records depending on the source and has caused a nightmare for chronology. This is without taking into account the so-called Dark Ages, falsification and added time suggested by researchers such as Anatoly Fomenko. Start by reading from Anglo-Saxon Poetry by S.A.J. Bradley, which is a collection of, as you can imagine, Anglo-Saxon poetry. So we'll start off with this, which has got some interesting points which talks of the destruction to Britain. Wondrous is this wallstone, broken by fate. The castles have decayed. The work of giants is crumbling. Roofs are fallen. Ruinous are the towers. Despoiled are the towers with their gates. Frost is on the cement. Broken are the roofs. Cut away, fallen, undermined by age. The grasp of the earth, stout grip of the ground, holds its mighty builders, who have perished and gone. Till now 100 generations of men have died. Often this wall, grey with lichen and stained with red, and moved under storms, has survived kingdom after kingdom. Its lofty gate has fallen. The bold in spirit bound foundation of the wall wondrously together with wires. Bright were the castle dwellings, many the bathhouses, lofty the host of pinnacles, great the tumult of men, many a mead hall, full of the joys of men, till fate the mighty overturned that. The white walls fell, days of pestilence came, death swept away all the bravery of men. Their fortresses became waste places, the city fell to ruin, the multitudes who might have built it anew lay dead on the earth. Wherefore these courts are in decay, and these lofty gates, the woodwork of the roof is stripped of tiles. The place has sunk into ruin, levelled to the hills, where in times past many men, light of heart and bright with gold, adorned with splendours, proud and flushed with wine, shone in war trappings, gazed on treasure, on silver, precious stones, on riches, possessions, on costly gems, on the bright castle of the broad kingdom. Stone courts stood here. The stream, with its great gush, sprang forth hotly. The wall enclosed all within its bright bosom, where the baths were hot in its centre that was spacious. It's one of the notes by Alan Hassel, who brought this information together, who unfortunately passed away some many years ago. He notes that the wall is the one left standing at Roxeter, which I will put a picture up now. .231 from this book, which is Re Christ 3. It says, "The deep universe will reverberate, and ahead of the Lord the most enormous billowing will sweep across the spacious earth. Scorching flame will roar, the heavens will split asunder, and the stars, fixed and shining, will fail. Then the sun, which brightly shone above the earlier world of the children of men, will be made dusty with the colour of blood. Likewise, the moon, which once illuminated humankind by night, will fall down, and so to the stars will be scattered from heaven, lashed by storms through the violent air. Thus the ravening visitant will scour Earth's plains. The ravaging flame will raze tall buildings to the ground by the terror of fire, and the Holocaust, notorious afar, hot and ravening for gore, will raze the world withal. The shattered walls of cities will collapse outright. Mountains will melt, and lofty cliffs, which once securely shielded the land against the main, and against its tides, firm and stable, bastions against the breakers and leaping water. The deadly flame will catch every creature there, beast and birds. The fiery, sooty flame, a turbulent warrior, will travel across the land. Whereas waters flowed before, and driven tides, then the fishes of the ocean will scorch in a sea of fire, stopped from swimming. Every beast of the wave will perish in misery. The water will burn like wax. That's Anglo-Saxon poetry. They talk about the wall that fell. Also talk at the beginning of giants, the creation of giants, which makes sense because England actually comes from the Saxon Engel for angel, land of angels. Now we know from the Bible and other sources that angels came down and mated with man to create the Nephilim, giants. Now, is it possible that Britain was a home to these angels, these giants? Well, now Gildas was there. He was a friend of King Arthur, and Gildas, he escaped what happened, obviously. There is a book that you can find called On the Ruin of Britain. You can find that, go read it for yourself, but Gildas died eventually in Brittany. So the 8 years after the event, died in Brittany in France, buried at the Rhys Peninsula. After this event, King Arthur and all the survivors, well, some of them scattered to wherever they could get to, but most of them all moved from the south of Wales to Brittany in France. Gildas wrote, "The fire of righteous vengeance blazed from sea to sea. Once lit, it did not die down. It burnt up almost the whole surface of the island. Horrible it was to see the foundation stones of towers and high walls thrown down bottom upwards. Fire is sent from heaven, whilst the fire of heaven burns. Days are as dark as night. The Isle of Axome was suddenly overwhelmed. Vast numbers of trees were burned through near the ground." Gildas is writing that something destroyed Britain, that the fire of righteous vengeance blazed from sea to sea. So that is from the tip of Scotland down to the bottom of England. This entire country was on fire. Both of these islands burnt in the sea. Gregory de Tours, he does talk about the two islands in the sea burning end to end. It's incredible. Which is why Gildas died in Brittany, because he had to move to Brittany, because Britain was uninhabitable for, some say 7, others say 15, settle on 11 years. About 11 years of the country being uninhabitable. If you went there, you died. If you drank any of the water, you ate the food, you died. Which is why we see the wastelands in films of Arthurian Legend. Yeah, the warrior of fire that went across the land, killing everybody. This is destruction of a biblical proportion. Hysilio's Chronicles of the Kings of Britain. At this time a star of amazing size appeared. It had one beam, and on the head of the beam was a ball of fire like a dragon. And from the jaws of the dragon 2 beams ascended, one towards the extremity of France, and the other towards Ireland, subdividing itself into 7 small beams. Uther, as Arthur, and all around him, alarmed by such an appearance, inquired of the learned men what it might portend. Merlin, bursting into tears, exclaimed, "Sons of Britain, ye have suffered an irrecoverable loss. Ye are widowed of Emrys the Great, but still ye have a king. Haste thou therefore, Uther, and engage the enemy, for the whole island shall be thine. For it is thou, Uther, who art signified by this star with the head of a dragon. By the beam pointing over France is denoted a son of thine, who shall be great in wealth and extensive in sway, and by that directed towards Ireland, a daughter whose sons and grandsons shall successively govern the whole." Arthur survived the initial destruction. He's then supposedly gone on to fight the Battle of Camlan. We see that this star has come to Britain. Now, like I said, Arthur, or Uther, had to go to France, and his brother, Prince Madoc, sailed to the Americas. You'll find evidence for Mobile Bay, where he landed, Prince Madoc. Unfortunately, though, they seem to have got the date wrong, because they put 1170, whereas he supposedly went in 570. So that's a 600-year discrepancy. This is an article from Science Daily that was released in 2004. So as you can see, it says, scientists at Cardiff University, UK, believe they have discovered the cause of crop failures and summer frosts some 1500 years ago, a comet colliding with Earth. The team has been studying evidence from tree rings which suggest the Earth underwent a series of very cold summers around 536 to 540 AD, indicating an effect rather like a nuclear winter. The scientists in the School of Physics and Astronomy believe this was caused by a comet hitting the Earth and exploding in the upper atmosphere. The debris from this giant explosion was such that it enveloped the Earth in soot and ash, blocking out the sunlight and causing the very cold weather. We know that Britain and Ireland were set on fire by this comet. We know that the destruction has caused a global blackout. And we also see that at Pumapunku in Peru, a 7-story temple was destroyed, with huge boulders found up to 1 kilometer away, some of these weighing up to 50 tons. So just think about the power necessary to blast those stones up to 1 kilometer away. Blow them away like they were made of paper mache. But we also find that some of these stones have been magnetized from the heat, so placing a compass nearby would cause the needle to spin, looking for north. We also see a mile-long section of land with 6 feet holes following the southwesterly direction of the comet's path. This is something you might have seen recently in Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse, which lines up correctly with a comet coming from Britain towards the southwest to South America. St. Paul's Stone. A stone found in St. Paul's Cathedral in 1850 which depicts a dragon was found to have inscribed Colburn writing which says, "No one knew what a dragon looked like." Colburn is considered by academia to be a fake language fabricated in the 18th century. Few historians like Alan Wilson, however, have claimed it to be the alphabet of the ancient British people prior to this calamity. It's a language we find all over. It's definitely not fake. You can find it in America. The Welsh-speaking Indians of America wrote with the Colburn alphabet. Note is that dragon, which you might have seen, the George dragon, the Welsh dragon that is seen on all of their flags. Welsh dragon actually means lightning stone. Sounds a lot like a comet. Archaeological dig at St. Peter's in 1990 under Dr. Eric Talbot found human bones fused into the rock. So just imagine what kind of heat would be necessary to fuse human bone into rock. We've also got Vitrified Force, which originally were found in Scotland and then the rest of England, particularly down the Pennines, which is the mountain range called the backbone of England. We find rocks and forts that have been vitrified, which is quite literally turned to glass in some cases, but the rock has been melted together by a very high heat. So I'll just read this is from Wikipedia. This is what Wikipedia has to say about vitrified forts. Vitrified forts are stone enclosures whose walls have been subjected to vitrification through heat. It was long thought that these structures were unique to Scotland, but they have ever since been identified in several other parts of Western and Northern Europe. No lime or cement has been found in any of these structures, all of them presenting the peculiarity of being more or less consolidated by the fusion of the rocks which they are built. This fusion, which has been caused by the application of intense heat, is not equally complete in the various forts, or even in the walls of the same fort. In some cases, the stones are only partially melted and calcined. In others, their adjoining edges are fused so that they are firmly cemented together. In many instances, pieces of rock are enveloped in a glassy enamel-like coating which binds them into a uniform whole, and at times, though rarely, the entire length of the wall presents one solid mass of vitreous substance. It is not clear why or how the walls were subjected to vitrification. Some antiquarians have argued that it was done to strengthen the wall, but the heating actually weakens the structure. Battle damage is also unlikely to be the case, as the walls are thought to have been subjected to carefully maintained fires to ensure they were hot enough for vitrification to take place. The expert consensus explains Vitrified Force as the product of deliberate destruction, either following the capture of the site by an enemy force or by the occupants at the end of its active life as an act of ritual closure. The process has no chronological significance and is found during both Iron Age and early medieval forts in Scotland. Imagine burning the walls of these forts. These forts are not exactly grand forts. A lot of the time they're just stone walls. The idea that the enemy would go out of their way to burn these, and again, to melt stone, you need 2,000 degrees, at least. There is no way you can melt these stones. And how do you place fire above the walls? You have to build the fire. The bottom of the wall is going to be getting hit by heat. The top, and as you will find, the most burnt areas are the top, and it gets weaker as it goes down. As this article points out, it's not even the same in forts. They've not done the same job throughout the whole fort. It's not the same level of vitrification, so it's an accident. It's something that's happened. The only way this could have happened is if the atmosphere itself was heated to thousands of degrees momentarily, which would have seen all the trees burn down. So we're looking at something that has been so hot that it melted rock and burnt all the trees down in Britain 1500 years ago. What we know from the dendrochronology data is that 1500 years ago all the trees in Britain and some in Europe died off. And we're also seeing in areas of Europe and particularly Britain vitrified forts that can only be explained by the same phenomena that has destroyed all the trees. Arthur C Clarke's Mysterious World, I like this little bit because it's interesting to note that the 16th of September episode of 1980 episode of Arthur C Clarke's Mysterious World features a segment in which the archaeologist Ian Ralston examines the mystery of the vitrified fort Tapo North, and tries to recreate how it might have been accomplished by piling stones and setting a massive bonfire, repeating the work of Gordon Child and Wallace Thornycroft in the 1930s. The experiment produced a few partially vitrified stones, but it was asserted that no answers were gleaned as to how large-scale forts could have been crafted with the approach tried in the program. So this is in the 1980s. They have attempted to work out how they did this vitrification. They've attempted to replicate the vitrification with fires, and whilst they've managed to melt a couple stones, they've been like, nah, there's no way that this is how they did it. So you've got to realise that this vitrification was not done on purpose. And if it wasn't done on purpose, what caused it? What caused stone to physically melt? Well, I'm going to guess that it's the same thing that caused all the trees to burn down. And I'm going to guess that it's the same thing that Gildas was talking about, and it's the same thing that Tysilio was talking about, and it's the same thing that the Anglo-Saxon poetry was talking about. And this is where we will tie it to the beginning of the story. I'll play this clip, actually, this small clip from a VHS tape from 1992 that Alan Wilson was talking about. And it's just a very small clip, so I'll play that.
Snake, you've heard serpent mounds, right? There's a couple in Kentucky, there's 4 in Ohio, there's some in West Virginia. And we heard a fellow down there talking where we were presenting a couple weeks ago, or last week, down in Columbus, Georgia. And he says, well, he showed all the pictures of these snake mounds, and he says, that's the only place in the world they've got them. And he's going, what's going on this continent, man? You know, a few centuries back, they were all over the place in the British Isles. Don't they know that Patrick, who was a Welsh monk, started out in 434, went up into Ireland to rid Ireland of the snakes? It's all in the legend. There's snakes all over Ireland, but not stone snakes. And he lit his fire in them, and he lit it early in the day, and when the snake worshippers came, it had been desecrated, and he rid Ireland of stone snakes. Their days and their times and their clocks and the things they've set up, very accurate, very accurate. They knew that this comet's coming back. I don't know if you saw the paper today or not, but somebody said, hey, you know, there's going to be a comet coming back here in, what is it, 2020, 29? He's been predicting 2015. Victor Klube is pretty close to that. It's a recurring thing. It says it could wipe out the continent. It gets a little scary.
That bit that he mentioned about the comet in 2029. Now that got me interested, and I googled the comet. It's 99942 Apophis. Snake god eating the sun that we have seen written all over the world, warned to us by the ancients. The Apophis is known in other cultures as the Leviathan. Is there a possibility that the ancients knew that in 2029 Apophis would return to finish the job? Is that why scientists have been apparently attempting to divert a comet in space? Is that what's going on? There's many possibilities out there. The important thing to learn from this is that there is talk of a comet throughout history that seems to have evidence for it. Now, what if this is a cyclical thing? What if this comet does come round every 1,500 years and fuck shit up for us? And what if we've got to survive it this time? Who knows? Maybe that's what's causing the resets. Maybe they don't want us to know, to remember the comet. Maybe if we knew that the end of the world was coming, we all wouldn't go to work. We're just asking questions. I hope I covered everything there in the section of British Comet 562. If you got any questions, please throw a comment down below and hit a like so we can defeat that YouTube algorithm. But thank you very much for listening.